Hey everyone, this is Andrew Hutchinson, the managing editor of HawgBeat.com, the Arkansas site and the Rivals Network. It took a Herculean effort from Kevin Kopps, but the Diamond Hogs have advanced to the Super Regionals for a third straight postseason and are now 2 wins away from making it back to Omaha. Standing in their way, though, is a red-hot North Carolina State team that swept through the Ruston Regional in dominant fashion last week. To preview this weekend's matchup with an expert's perspective, I'm super excited to welcome on Justin Williams from the Wolfpacker, the NC State site in our network. Justin, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm doing well. Can't complain. Just ready for some exciting baseball coming up this weekend. I feel like this is going to be a really good matchup between, clearly the front runner to win the College World Series in Arkansas and probably one of the hottest teams in the country, if not the hottest team in the country in NC State. So it should be a good battle.
I'm looking forward to it for sure. And before we really dive into that matchup, I was wondering if you could maybe give us a little bit of a broad view on the kind of season NC State's had and what have they been looking like lately?
Well, it's really been an interesting season. So typically, the history of NC State baseball, typically it's a hot start and a cold finish. Well, this year it's the complete opposite for Elliott Avent in his 25th season with the program. Obviously, he's one of the most winningest current active coaches in college baseball right now, and this has been a resilient bunch. He keeps talking about this team like it's one of his first teams that got to a super regional, and they had a really slow start to the season. To be really frank, they had 1-8 ACC record in their first 3 series in conference play. I think their record was like 4-9 overall. They lost a couple, head scratcher non-conference games as well. But they really turned it around at the end of the regular season. I mean, there was one point where this NC State team, the question for them was not, are we going to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large team? The question was, can they even make the ACC tournament? Because you got to finish above the bottom two in the standings. And when you're sitting at 1-8, they were, I believe at one point, dead last in the ACC. And it's been a complete turnaround because they end up finishing with the second best record in the ACC. They get the 3 seed in the ACC tournament because there's 2 divisions in the conference and each of the winners of those divisions get the top 2 seeds. But they played really well in Charlotte in the ACC championship. They lost a 1-0 pitchers duel to a red hot Duke team that had won 10 straight going into that game. Of course, Duke ends up really having an interesting, disappointing showing in the regional, getting hammered by Liberty a couple times. So I guess they got, maybe they got a little too hot too quickly, but they won the ACC championship for the first time in their program's history. And maybe that's what NC State needed. Maybe they needed to lose that ACC championship to have the success after that, because they played with a chip on their shoulder in the Ruston Regional. And really, they were never really challenged, to be really honest, in the Ruston Regional. They were down 4-0 in the first 4 innings of the Sunday evening matchup with Louisiana Tech, the host, the 1 seed. Louisiana Tech had to win 2 in a row. State just needed 1. They were down 4-0, and then they scored 9 runs in 2 innings. They scored 10, and then they added 4 more after that. So before you knew it, it was 13-5. And this team's got hot bats. And that's pretty much the season so far.
And you talked about that 1-8 start. I mean, what was the key to getting things back on track? I mean, were there guys that were injured, they got healthy, or did they just figure things out, or what happened there?
Well, the pitching has improved. Let's just put it that way, first and foremost. I mean, I think they had to identify who their go-to staff was going to be in terms of starters. I think maybe there was a little bit of overthinking involved in terms of the rotation. Should you put your best guy out for Friday, or should you try to, space it out so you can start your best guy, 2 times in 1 week potentially? The bullpen was, lackluster to begin the season, but really the bullpen's gotten better as the year's gone on. It's become a leaner pitching staff, but they're going with guys that have been proven and are working time and time again. The bats weren't as hot early on in the season, but everyone knew that the talent was there, and it was only a matter of time when those bats were going to start, popping off. And, now you look at NC State as a team that has the best offense in the ACC, which is still, it's not the SEC, but it's still a really good baseball conference. And They have 5 guys that have double-digit home run numbers, 4 guys that are hitting 300 and 320 or better. So, the offense and the fielding, NC State stacks up with anybody. The pitching is going to be, really that's going to be what makes the difference in if they get to Omaha or not.
Yeah, I'm going to ask about the pitching here in a bit, but I was going to start at the plate. I mean, you mentioned the 4 guys hitting 320 plus and the 5 guys with double digit home runs. Is this the kind of lineup that can beat you 1 through 9? And who are the top guys in that lineup that Arkansas fans should be aware of?
Well, it really is, Andrew. You look at JT Jarrett, a guy that bats 9th in the lineup. He's hit, I believe, 2 or 3 doubles here in the postseason. If you combine the conference championship and the Ruston Regional together, a stretch of 6 games there where, he's been pretty hot at the plate. He's the 9th guy. He hits in the low 200s. He's got his batting average up to 251 now. When I checked the last time in the regular season, he was like around 220. He's a really solid defender at second base, which is why he has his spot in the lineup. And he's a really smart baseball player, but it's coming together for him at the plate. The guy you should really watch, there's multiple guys in this lineup you should watch out for. Johnny Butler's the obvious one from a statistical standpoint, just because the guy's batting 389. There was one point he was batting over 400 this season. He was a first-team All-ACC selection, had an argument to be the ACC Player of the Year. There was just a period there where it was like hitting a watermelon at the plate for him. The bat just probably seemed so big for him. It was like, backyard wiffle ball there for a second. He hasn't been as hot, in the postseason. Now, he still had some really big plays. This entire lineup's been hot. But watch out for Devontae Brown. He hit a big grand slam in the 5th inning against Louisiana Tech with the game tied at 5 apiece. And he's a power hitter. He has 12 home runs this year. That's tied for 3rd most on the team. And Tyler McDonough's just, a really great overall player. 15 home runs. He has the most on the team. He's batting 351. So he's got the power. He's got the ability to get on plate. But yeah, there's really not anybody in this lineup I'd sleep on, because about every other batter, you're going to run into a guy that can take one, out of the ballpark for you.
And I was a little bit surprised to see that NC State has 70 stolen bases this year, and four individual guys that have 10 or more stolen bases. Sometimes with teams with power, like Arkansas, for example, don't really run as much because, why would you risk it if the next guy could hit it over the fence? So is NC State a team that likes to run the bases and steal on teams? Is that something we should expect to see this weekend?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Elliott Avent is an aggressive manager. He's an old school head baseball coach. He's not that he ignores the analytics, but he's not one of these new wave guys that's, hit a homer or strike out kind of guy. He wants guys on base. He wants aggressive base runners. He's not afraid to bunt. So yeah, you're exactly right. There's multiple guys up and down this lineup that you need to be watching out for to steal bases. Jose Torres would be the number 1 guy. Terrell Tatum. Sorry. I'm like looking at the stat sheet here and it's late here in Raleigh, but 15 stolen bases and 17 attempts, super quick. And he's a guy that you also got to watch for at the plate too, because he's got sneaky pop, if you will. I think he's 6'1", 170, not the biggest guy. He steps up to the plate. You're not suspecting that he's the cleanup hitter, but he'll send one up, deep into the outfield over that fence. So watch out for him. Great base runner and a great hitter.
And moving things on to the mound, I was wondering if you could maybe give us an idea of what the starting rotation looks like for the Wolfpack, and who's kind of the ace, and what do they do well?
Reed Johnston is starting to earn the reputation that one would expect if you're going to call him an ace. I would say that's been NC State's problem for most of this year, is that, when you think ace, sometimes people refer to an ace as the number 1 guy in a starting rotation. And some people are more of the opinion that there's only about 10 or 15 aces in the big leagues. And you really got to be a guy that, opposing lineups are going to fear if you're going to earn the term ace. Reed Johnston is starting to deliver that. He's been great in the postseason. He's led the pack to 2 must-win situations, the first being in the ACC tournament when he was in a do or die game to clinch a semifinals appearance. And then the second being the first game of the Ruston Regional, which obviously you know how important it is to win that first game, particularly if you're in a 2 seed and you're competing against a team that can easily beat you. So Reed Johnson is going to be the one to watch for. He's got the team low ERA at 3.90, 8-2 on the season. I know, win-loss records really don't matter for pitchers, but if you care about that sort of thing, he's won ball games and he's hot right now. And he's also the strikeout guy of the starting rotation. 86 strikeouts compared to 21 walks on the season. He has the team high in strikeouts as well. So Sam Highfield's probably going to be the number 2 guy. You probably see him on Saturday. And if it goes to Sunday, I would expect to see Matt Willardson. All guys under a 5.0 ERA. These aren't guys that, Arkansas is going to come in thinking that it's going to be a struggle to get the ball or get the bat on the ball. But these are guys that are capable of retiring the side 1, 2, 3 and getting out 5, 6 innings and then handing it over to the bullpen, where Chris Villman and Evan Justice have really stepped up here recently.
And that kind of leads me into my next question. I was going to ask, looking at the stat sheet, it looks like those 3 starters and those 2 relievers, those 5 guys, they account for like 80% of the team's total innings this year. Are those like the 2 main relievers, guys you just mentioned? And, what happens if the starters, get knocked around a little bit and can't go deep into games? Does NC State have enough pitching beyond those 5 guys?
Well, they've got arms. They're young arms. They're talented arms, but they're young arms, and they're arms that are going to be, stepping into that environment in Fayetteville. I watched the videos over the weekend. It looked absolutely insane. That's excited about this weekend. It looks like you guys have one of the best environments, if not the best environment in college baseball. So hats off to you guys over there in Fayetteville. But you don't really want to roll out a freshman, particularly if you're already trailing, and put them into that type of environment. So ideally, NC State will just be pitching these 5 guys. That's what NC State fans should be hoping for. And more so than anything, because here's the thing, State's not afraid to get into a gunfight. They can win games in double-digit run situations. We could see a 15-12 type finish in one of these games. They need their starters to be able to last at least 6 innings, because they got to be able to save the bullpen arms with Evan Justice and Chris Villman, because those have been the reliable guys. And that's where earlier on the season, you're kind of identifying who are the trusted guys. You're trying to see who's going to work out and who's not. And some of these young guys, maybe they're just not ready for the moment. Maybe they just need a little bit more time. That's why you've seen kind of the success here towards the end of the season, because they've leaned out that pitching staff, and we'll see. But if Arkansas starts getting, if you see a starter get removed early on in a game, that's a very good sign for Arkansas.
And that's kind of the last thing I was going to ask you about is, in your opinion, what does NC State need to do to be able to come in here and pull off an upset? And then on the flip side, what does Arkansas need to do in order to avoid being upset?
Well, the bats have to stay hot. That was really the problem they ran into in the one loss that they've had here in the postseason, the ACC championship game against Duke. They got a really great performance from Willardson, and then Chris Villman came in and shut out Duke for the rest of the game. They only let up 1 run. That has to be a win for NC State. NC State cannot afford to lose in a game where they hold this Arkansas lineup to anything less than 3 runs. They can't leave that money on the table. And NC State, from the looks of it, you guys got that reliever that's got to be the best pitcher on the country. That dude looks like he's dealing, and you can't let that guy step on the mound and not have a lead. You just can't, because NC State doesn't really have. They got guys that are capable of dealing and shutting teams down, but they don't have anybody that's going to put that type of fear in the lineup. State's not going to be scared. They're not going to be afraid to hit that guy, but they have to strike early. And I think that it's really important for them to get a win in game 1. Arkansas, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody. They should be the favorites. NC State's a really hot team though. So, if they come in and steal game 1, then it's anybody's series.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, Justin. I know Arkansas fans really appreciate the kind of the insider's perspective on the Wolfpack. Before I let everyone go, I want to give a quick shout out to CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers. They've been our sponsor of Arkansas baseball coverage all year long at HawgBeat. They've got locations in Fayetteville and Russellville. It's one of my favorite spots to grab a bite to eat. So I recommend y'all check them out as well. And as a reminder, the Super Regional between Arkansas and NC State begins Friday. First pitch scheduled for 5 p.m. Central. Saturday's game is at 2, and Sunday's, if necessary, game is at 5. All three of them will be on Real TV. I know that's something Arkansas fans have been getting fired up about lately. ESPNU for game 1, ESPN2 for game 2, and then one of those two channels for game 3. As Justin was saying, it should be a really fun weekend at Baumwalker Stadium, and can't wait to see everyone out there.